All right, thank you, everyone. It is 5:30. We're going to go ahead and get this policy meeting started. We have a very full agenda. Ms. Shope, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Spencer Anderson,
Present.
Amy Levy.
Here.
All members are present in the boardroom.
Thank you so much. All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve today's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the March 1st policy meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
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 And I will abstain. All right, that motion passes as well. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with policy 443.4, student alcohol and other controlled substance use. Okay, we will take this one page at a time. So starting with the first page, actually everything on the second page is omitted. So we'll just take this policy all at once. Board Member Schneider, any changes, questions, edits?
I do not have any.
Board Member Anderson, same question.
I do not have any.
Okay, so in looking at policy 443.4, the first sentence after the portion that's been stricken, the use, possession, or transfer, at the end of that second line, it looks like in the original that was a semicolon. I'm not sure what that is at the end, but if we could get that corrected. And then my question is, apparently there's a board policy called 443/447, and I put that in my notes for March. Is there any resolution to why that policy is named that way?
Yes, because it's referring to the student code of conduct, which is right before the semicolon. So that can be stricken. It was just, student code of conduct is board policy 443/447.
Okay, so my question is, most policies just have one number. So is there a reason this one is 443/447?
I don't know the answer to that. That's the code of conduct policy number.
I don't have an answer for that one, Mrs. Levy.
Okay, so.
I don't, I'm not, don't.
No problem. That was on my list from March, so if we could revisit that and
I don't-
find out
yeah.
why it's.
I apologize. I don't think that's how we interpreted your question in March.
Oh,
So
okay.
my apologies.
No worries. All right.
So you just want it deleted, X, or what do you want?
Well, I'm assuming since it's there, there's a reason why it's there.
Well, in board docs, code of conduct is policy 443-447, or /447.
To my knowledge, that's the only policy that's
Correct.
named that way.
Correct.
And I don't want to change it unless there's a reason for it that maybe we just don't understand. That's why I asked the question. Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as I know, for the 20 years I've been in the superintendent's office, in my recollection, it's been named that way for a long time. I believe it's because the contents of the code of conduct fall into those two category numbers. So at some point, the board must have said, we want to call it 443/447, because the WASB numbering guide that we use, those two numbers must be representative of the student code of conduct. I can double check that book, and then I can let Dr. Garrison know, and he can inform you guys in like his Friday updates, or we can send an email out to the committee or something to let you know why it has those two numbers, and then you can decide whether you want to continue with it or not.
Okay, so let me ask the administration this. Are you fine with ending that sentence? It will be held to the student code of conduct?
Yes.
All right. So if we can do our running list of things we want to follow up on, one, I'm still curious why it's named that way, so please do find that out. but for the purposes of this policy, we will just omit and put a period after conduct. Everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Anything else for policy 443.4? All right, moving on to Rule 1 of that policy. This one's a few pages long, so we'll just take it one page at a time. Board Member Schneider, anything on that first page?
I do not have anything.
All right, Board Member Anderson, same question.
I do not have any.
Okay. My only question is canine searches are referenced in that first page, and I'm wondering, are there any criteria around how canine searches are executed, why canine searches are initiated? Do you have context around that?
We do have a policy, and I don't have that policy number with me right now. I had it at the last meeting, and I thought I wrote it down. But there's a policy, and there is no, it talks about random canine searches.
There's a policy that talks about random canine searches?
Yeah, if you guys want to answer questions, I can pull it up while you.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. The policies that are cross-referenced at the end of this policy, would that be one of the ones you're referring to? And then I don't really understand what a random canine search is. I don't think I would be interested in that, but my question is, are there criteria around, when is a canine search initiated? And then what is the criteria for how that search is executed? And while you're looking for that, we can move forward and then just let me know when you're ready to jump back in. Okay, so page 3 is omitted. So page 2, half of the information is there. Board Member Schneider or Anderson, any edits or questions with page 2?
I do not have anything.
Okay. Page 3 is slated to be omitted, and then the same with page 4. How are we doing on the canine search? We need some more time?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we will just put a pin in 443.4 and 443.4 Rule 1. And that will bring us to policy 453.1, emergency nursing services. All right, this one is just one page. Board Member Schneider or Anderson, any questions, edits?
I do not have anything.
Okay.
I do not have anything either.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Okay, so in the first part, it says a qualified physician shall be appointed by the superintendent or designee to serve as the medical advisor. Has that ever happened?
Yes, it's never been just for a 3-year term, but yes, the medical advisor has been.
For her as long as I can remember. So before 2009, we've had a medical advisor,
And who is our medical advisor?
Dr. Rudisell,
Okay.
and he's been our advisor since 2014.
And what does that look like? Like, it's not someone who's in district? Is that
Correct.
someone who is available for
Correct.
consultation?
Yes.
Okay. And then if we go down towards the end, it says, the medical advisor in conjunction with a professional nurse, other school district personnel, and representatives from community health agencies shall assist in the annual review of policies and procedures and first aid standing orders pertaining to the emergency nursing services program. Which policies are slated for annual review? I'm assuming there's a group.
So for the, yes, and these ones would be the ones that we kind of review every year, and he actually signs off on just stating that, yes, he agrees with them, and they're part of our first aid protocol, so they're actually in our first aid protocol book.
Okay, but my question is, which policies are up for annual review?
These ones right here that we're looking at, so these emergency nursing services, again, they don't come to the board for review, but him and I, and then in consultation with other district nurses and community members, such as like the health department, other associations from there, review them just to make sure, again, that we're not missing anything. It's not very intensive, like we're not going line by line like we are right now, but again, we do review them and just make sure that there's nothing that we feel is like out of date that we need to update in regards to emergency nursing services.
So you review it, but not line by line?
Yes, we review it just, again, to see if there's anything that needs to be updated. And then we sign off that we are still including those in our emergency nursing services.
Okay, so policy 453 and 453.1 and 453.1 Rule 1, is there a list of policies that you review annually is what I'm looking for?
So again, we do review these policies.
When you say these, like what, which
The ones
policies
we're
are these?
talking about today, sorry. The ones we're talking about today. So that's emergency nursing service, policy 453.1 and also 453.1 Rule 1.
So those two policies are reviewed
Correct.
annually, and those are the only two?
Correct. And then also says procedures, because again, we do review our first aid procedures every year as well.
Okay, so you don't do the administrate medication to students?
Those ones we do not do annually, no.
Okay, so since it's just those two policies, is anyone opposed to us including those so we know what the expectation is to be reviewed annually? And I thought it would be a more robust list, and so is there a reason it's just those two policies?
There is not a reason why it's just those two policies, no.
Okay. Okay. And then the last sentence, emergency services shall be available during the school day as well as during all school-sponsored activities. What is the interpretation of school-sponsored activities?
So
And the
like-
reason I ask is because I've been at school events, and it was not apparent to me that we had emergency services on site in case they were needed.
And that, it might not be apparent, they're not announced, but staff members are trained, coaches are trained to do that, provide those first aid.
Okay, so
services.
for example, our band was playing at Gap last week. That's
Mm-hmm.
a school-sponsored activity. There was emergency service professionals
There
there.
should have been. So if the nurse was informed, because again, like we need to get informed obviously by the principals, which they are very good at doing, then yes, and usually it's the staff member. Usually a lot of our teachers actually are trained to give first aid medications. Just because when they go on field trips and stuff like that, we have to make sure that they're trained. So a lot of them have students that have medications, including emergency medications, so we have to train them before they even go on field trips. So several of our staff members are trained to give first aid.
Perfect. So is that you coordinating with the athletics and activities director, or is that the building nurses? How does that structure work?
So it depends. So it's different. For high school coaches, yes, I do coordinate that just because the high school nurse has an abundance of duties to do already. So I do help her coordinate for the coaches, along with our department chairperson helps coordinate that as well.
Okay, and you're saying coaches, but this says all school-sponsored
Correct, sorry.
activities, so like plays and.
So that's different. So that's why I said that. It's different for depending on what the group is. But besides for the high school coaches, then it is the building nurse that does the training with them. And then that's the same thing for when they go on off-site for field trips. It would be the building nurse that does that training with those staff members.
Okay, so I know you're referencing sports and you're referencing field trips, but like
And
activities, like.
the same thing for after-school activities. It would all go for the building nurse.
So the building nurse coordinates that, not you with the athletic and activities director?
Unless, only sports. I only coordinate with the athletic director for sports stuff at the high school. But if it's for anything else, then it would be the building nurse.
Okay. Dr. Garrison, do you want that listed in the policy so people kind of understand who they need to contact for what? Or would you like to put that in administrative regs? How would you like to handle that?
So typically, the way Mrs. Bablis is explaining, and also I want to just say congratulations, she became a
National Board Certified School Nurse.
Yes, National Board Certified School Nurse. We just
Thank
got that information. So again, congratulations to that.
Thank you.
Typically in the school district, we do rely on the expertise of the nurse and the school nurses to kind of coordinate those things. I have not seen it in a policy before, so if it's working, my question is, do we need it? I don't know. I'm in the middle on that one because the way she's explaining it is the way I understand it.
But I don't know if anyone else understands that. Like, if I'm just reading this policy and I'm supposed to have like emergency service at all
It
school
does
sponsored.
reference it
If you
somewhat.
let me finish, please. During all school sponsored activities, I wouldn't know that if it's an athletic event, then that's the school health director and the athletic and activities director coordinates that. Or if that's a play, then that's someone else who coordinates that. And it doesn't need to be in the policy, but I want policy to be easy, accessible, and relevant for our staff. So if you don't want to put in policy, that's perfectly fine. But do you think that would be important to have in like an administrative regulation?
It can definitely go in the administrative I'm sorry. It can definitely go into the administrative regs.
Okay.
I agree with that part.
Perfect.
I'm not sure it needs to be in the policy, though.
Ms. Shope, would you put that on kind of like our running to-do list for this meeting? Thank you. Ms. Babilius, did you have something else?
I was just going to say, it is also referenced in the Rule 1 when it has like staff responsibilities. It does talk about the building nurse. So again, normally it wasn't the director coordinating with the director of athletics. I'm doing it more so to help her, and I've been doing it for the last 2 years, more to help that building nurse, not necessarily like that's just the way it goes. So again, I feel like because it does talk about building nurses, doing that training for them, I don't feel that we need to separate the two, but if you want to go ahead and add it, that's fine.
Yeah,
But
we
I
just
just wanted
took
to
care
let
of
that know.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on policy 453.1 before we move on to Rule 1? All right. This one is several pages long, so we'll take it one at a time. So we are on 453.1, Rule 1, Emergency Nursing Service Procedures. Board Member Schneider, any questions or edits on that first page?
I have nothing new.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, same question.
I have nothing new.
Okay. All right, so my first question from that opening information, what is the schedule for nurse coverage during the school day in our buildings? And I understand it may not be a full-time nurse at all buildings every day, but if you can just kind of sketch out, and if we could look at intermediate, elementary, intermediate, and then high school.
Can I just clarify the question? Did you say school nurse or like health staff?
School nurse?
So for school nurses, we have one at the high school, and she's there full-time. And then for intermediates, we have one that's in between, one for the east side, one for the west side, intermediate schools. And then for elementary, we have one that rotates between the east side elementary schools, and then one that rotates between the west side elementary schools. And then we have one at BLA that is there and is also a float. So she was hired for a float / BLA.
Okay, so at BLA, and I know this has been an issue in the past, how many days out of the week does BLA have nurse coverage? Is it, and you can ballpark, is like 1 day a week, 3 days a week?
This school year, I wouldn't be able to say just because we've had nurses out on leave. So she has been pulled more just because we've had nurses out on leave for extended leave. If I had to guess, maybe twice. I tried to make sure that she's there like during the lunch hour, just because we do have diabetics and we just want to make sure that she's there to help do that stuff. But if we were going hours, it just depends. And again, there's days that she's there for maybe it's just the lunch, or maybe she's there for the morning, or maybe she's just there in the afternoon.
Right.
It depends on the staffing needs of the district.
Okay. Dr. Garrison, are you aware of any legal implications for not having nursing services at a building?
Not legal, but I always say if there's ever an emergency, we try to make sure, of course, 911 is always available.
And we do have the MERT team, and then obviously when she's gone, we have staff who are trained to give any medication that needs to be given in that building. The MERT team's trained to give every medication that's in that building.
So I always lean back on what are the procedures just in case we don't. In this case, thank you for sharing about the MERT team. So, or of course 911. And
So several-
emergencies will happen in school buildings. I know you're aware of that. I just think that our goal is to, provide the highest services that we can throughout the school day with the number of nurses that we have, and of course the number of schools that we have. So.
Yep. And then just to clarify, so the MERT team and then is certified for CPR, first aid, and AED use.
What was the last one?
AED.
The AED,
Okay.
and then again to administer medications.
Okay, and then if we go down to the bottom of page 1, number 2, item D, and this is under responsibilities of school nurse, review annually with the principal and director of school health services regarding staff needs for the MERT. What are they reviewing? Review what annually?
I'm sorry, 2B.
No problem. Page 1, under B, number 2, and then lowercase d. So review annually with the principal and director of school health. What is it that is being reviewed annually?
So, review annually the MERT team needs. So like, do we need more people trained? Because even though their certification is good for 2 years, I mean, we have staff obviously that rotate between different buildings. So we try to make sure that we maintain a healthy number of staff members in each building that are on the MERT team and are trained.
Okay, so would it make more sense to say review MERT team needs annually with the principal and director of school health services?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Ms. Shope, did you need me to repeat that? Okay. All right, moving on to page 2. Board members Schneider or Anderson, any questions or edits?
I have nothing new.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're looking at number 3, responsibilities of principals, and specifically F, G, and H. It talks about, see that all accidents resulting in seriously bodily injury are reported to the superintendent or designee. So let's just take these one at a time. Is that currently happening?
So from an administrative perspective, I will say yes. Typically, it doesn't always get up to me, but someone is notified as it pertains to bodily injury, and it is reported.
Okay.
Typically goes to Mrs. Babelis and or Mrs. Beavers.
It's been a long day.
I'm sorry. I know who Mrs. Beavers is.
I believe you. All right, perfect. I just want to check to make sure that we are in line with our policy. Designate a person in charge of the emergency care at each school-sponsored activity to inform the school nurse so training can occur. So, school activities, not just athletics. So like, I think Aldridge is doing The Little Mermaid. So when that play happens, people are regularly coordinating with the nurse, the building nurse, to make sure that someone is there for emergency services. Perfect. All right, and
What letter was that again? I'm
that's
sorry.
G.
Okay.
Yeah, number 3, under responsibilities of principals, and then lowercase g. And then see that parents, guardians are contacted as necessary with student accidents or illness. And the reason I bring that up is that we have been contacted recently about that happening and students and parents not being informed. Could you just walk us through the process? Because hopefully people are listening in, and I think it would be good for, parents and community members to understand what our process is if a student is injured at school.
So it kind of depends. So like if it's like a minor injury, say a small child was out and they kind of scraped their knee or something like that. So for those minor injuries, we're not typically going to call parents. But if there's something, moderate to severe, like there's something on their face, or like obviously there's something that we feel like they need higher level of care, we will be contacting the families. We will attempt to contact. So we usually will call the parent, leave a message. I know I've even emailed the parents if I can't get a hold of them by the phone. Usually I don't go to the emergency, or we as a department don't go to the emergency contact unless we feel, again, like they need a higher level of care, like someone needs to come and pick up this child to be seen.
Okay.
That's also documented in Skyward.
Yes, and then we make sure that we document that in Skyward in real time too, so.
Perfect. So any parent or guardian that has access to Skyward can go in and see that information?
No, currently they would not be able to see that, but if someone wanted to go back and reference, like, did that parent get called? If they have access to the health side of it, which admin would, and then obviously health staff would, they would be able to see that what attempts that we made to contact that parent and which parent it was, because sometimes obviously we have multiple
Right.
families, so.
Is there a like if I go into Skyward for my kids, I can see like attendance and discipline and grades. Is there a reason that I, as a parent, could not see, like if my child had a health incident or if they?
That's something I can talk to Robin about in regards to Skyward to see if there's something that they could flip.
Okay. Okay. Can we put that on our running list, Ms. Shope? Thank you so much.
There's updates to Skyward all the time, so it is possible.
Okay. On page 3, jump in if you have any questions or edits. All right. Okay. Okay, so I just had clarification needed under G, administration of emergency medications. And I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for this. So in the first 3 lines, it uses apparently experiencing a couple times. So for example, someone who is apparently experiencing a severe allergic reaction, a student who is apparently experiencing severe hypoglycemia. And so my question is, what are the consequences of administering Narcan, like what's referenced here, to someone who is not experiencing an opioid-related drug overdose?
So that's why we use that word apparently, because like there's not always a for sure way to tell, but the staff members that are trained would follow those protocols that we have in place that list the symptoms and situations where you would give it, and that would be apparently instead of they are having those symptoms.
Right, but my question is, what are the consequences of administering Narcan? Like you thought, you good faith effort, that that's what's needed. Turns out it's not. What are the consequences
So
of that?
there would not be any consequences because they would be under the Good Samaritan umbrella. So unless they're a health staff member that should have known better in that situation, they would be covered.
No, I might not be communicating clearly. Not for the individual who's administering it to the patient.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
So-
worries.
So there are, it's more risk if you thought in good faith and you did give it compared to if you did not give it. And they would have obviously risk of death. So we always do say you go ahead and give it, but the more common side effect would be like maybe racing heart. That would be more concerning. But again, when we give Narcan, part of that is we have to call an ambulance. So an ambulance would be on the way to treat any possible side effects. And some other mild common ones would be like a headache, nausea, vomiting, side effects that you would have with other kind of medications.
Okay. Perfect. All right, we are moving on to 453.4. It's just 2 pages, so we'll do this all at once. Any questions, comments, edits for either page on policy 453.4, administering medications to students?
I have nothing new to add.
Okay. You okay? All right. So, okay, if we go down to the 3rd paragraph that begins with administration of non-prescription medications, if we go down to the last sentence, medications must be picked up after 2 weeks. Is that after 2 weeks of the completed course of treatment?
Because it's an OTC med, it wouldn't be a course of treatment, so they're taking it for like an incident. So it would be from the start of whatever 2 weeks, that's when you would start the date. So say today's Monday, I would pick it up 2 weeks from today.
Okay, perfect. And then it says for grades 3K through 5th, but what about grades 6 through 12? And I know later it talks about high school students can have OTCs under certain conditions, but what about 6 through 8? If we don't want to include 6 through 12.
It would be the same, like they can have OTC medications, or they don't have to pick it up after the 2 weeks. They would just have to follow the same guidelines under the OTC medication. And if we didn't put the grades for 6, I do apologize for that. That was just an oversight, but it should be the 6th through 12th. It's just that 6th through 8th cannot self-carry.
Okay, so this should read 3K through 12?
No. So because this specifies the 2-week time frame, that's
Okay.
what I mean by the 4K through 5th. Like if they're in 4K through 5, they would have to pick up the non-prescription medication in 2 weeks.
So I'm sorry.
You're
Question,
fine.
yeah. So I got a similar question. So are we saying that for 6th through 12th grade, 6th through 8th grade doesn't have to, they can administer, right? They cannot, but 9th through 12th grade can. and
9 through 12 can, yeah.
9th through 12 can.
But sixth and eighth can have OTC medication for longer than a 2-week period. So say I'm in middle school and my parent wants to, me to have Tylenol just as needed for headaches. They would not have to just be a 2-week time frame, if that makes
Is
sense.
there a time frame attached at all?
No, so it'd be full just the school year.
I think we probably should explain that in this then.
Okay.
So can we add a line or,
So let me read the last sentence, and then like brilliance is going to drop in, and we're going to know what to say next. Okay, so medication must be picked up after 2 weeks for grades 3K through 5th. I guess I should just say 5. And needs to be renewed per incident. So what is it that you want to say about grades 6 through 8?
So I guess administration of non-prescription medications for grades, at the very first sentence, would be 3K through 12. Because those previous sentences are in regards to the OTC medication. It's just that this last sentence was specifically for 4K through 5th.
I have an idea.
3K. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe, so if you put first sentence of that paragraph, administration of non-prescription medication for students grades 3K through 12, and then that last sentence that you were just referring to, specifically for grades 4K through 5th, medication must be picked up after 2 weeks.
Okay, and we want to include 3K, right?
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that's fine. Ms. Shope, did you get that?
I didn't get it, so.
Okay. Could you repeat the first sentence? And I think the second one is left
Yes,
alone.
okay. So first sentence, administration of non-prescription medication for students grades 3K through 12 requires ... Rest of the sentence. Last sentence then, starting with medication, we would start it with specifically for grades 3K through 5, comma, medication must be picked up after 2 weeks and needs to be renewed per incident. Does that?
I got it. Everyone good?
I'm good, no, thank you.
Hey, here to help. All right. The end of this. Okay, so this is the next paragraph. Students with asthma may possess and self-administer a metered dose of dry powder inhaler with the written approval of licensed practitioner, parent/guardian, and school nurse. So my question is, if the licensed practitioner and the parent/guardian signs off, wouldn't the nurse just need to be notified?
No, because we still are ultimately responsible to make sure that they are getting the correct dose.
Okay.
So we would need to make sure that they are actually able to administer it correctly. And we cannot just take the word of somebody else that is doing it, because we are overseeing the administration of the medication. Even though they're able to self-administer, we're still responsible because they're in our building, and we're the health staff, that we're still liable.
So should we say under the guidance of? Because when I read that, I think you can have it in your pocket, and if you're on the playground and you need it, you just use your inhaler. You're saying that's not how that works?
No, the nurse would first need to verify that they're actually able to do it correctly. Now,
Okay.
if they're not, we would obviously educate them and make sure we get them there, but until that happens, they would need to keep it. But once they are able to do it, then yes, they can. That would be the process. They would go moving forward after we have signed off that they can do it.
Okay, so the way I read this is like the nurse, okay, the licensed practitioner and the parent need to give permission to have this medication, and also the nurse, so that's why it didn't make
Got it.
sense. But it sounds like what we want to say is that students must be trained by the nurse, or training must be confirmed by the nurse before they can self-administer. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, how do you want that language to read in the policy?
Period, and school, or comma, and school nurse must sign off on.
So if we ended it with, okay, students with asthma may possess and self-administer a metered dose of dry powder inhaler with the written approval of a licensed practitioner and parent/guardian,
After-
period. And then in order to self-administer a dose, the student, like, proper use must be confirmed by the nurse or proper.
Yes.
That feels a
Proper
little clunky.
administration, yes.
Okay.
Proper self-administration.
Perfect. So after that, so after parent/guardian, Ms. Shope, we're going to put a period, and then it should read, proper self-administration must be confirmed by the school nurse
Correct,
before the student can self-administer.
correct.
Ms. Shelby, do you have all that?
I just need to clarify, did you say must be or shall be?
Must.
Aren't both of those the same?
Ooh, shall is a little
I
stronger.
just didn't hear which word
Oh.
you said.
I said must. Is there a Dr.
I would
Garrison?
stick with must over shall.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And then just out of curiosity, does every building have a MERT team?
Yes,
All right. And everyone in that building knows who's on the MERT team?
correct.
Perfect. All right. That's all I got for that.
Well, there might be obviously last updates or throughout the year, but yes, they know the majority of the people that are on the team.
Okay. Oh, just at the bottom of that one, Ms. Shope, this might be a question for you. The state statute 118.2925, is that one linked? And if no, is there a reason?
Not yet. Once
Okay.
once the board approves it, then I'll link it when all the changes are made. I haven't linked it in case somebody said, oh, we don't need it, or we don't want it, or, you know. So
So is
once
that a
it's-
new addition?
It's an
Okay.
addition.
Got it. All right, so that puts us at 453.4, Rule 1. All right, this one is a little lengthy, so we'll take it one page at a time. Any questions or edits on that first page? And again, we're on 453.4, Rule 1, administering medication procedures.
I have nothing new.
Okay. Second page.
I have nothing new.
Okay. I have a question at the top of that second page. The very last sentence says, the prescribing licensed practitioner may be notified by school personnel when the parent/guardian requests the discontinuation of any medication at school. So I know we can do consent releases, so school administrators can talk to medical professionals about a student, but can school administrators reach out to medical professionals without the express consent of the parent?
So when we get that medication order, it is on there that they give permission for an administrator or health staff or designee to contact the prescriber, yes. And even if it was not in there per state statute, actually it's national, but we would be able to contact the provider because again, within our scope of practice, we are required to report any kind of concerns that we have for a student and their medication.
Okay. Are you required to alert the parent that that communication has taken place?
Usually we do it as a courtesy. We do it just because, I mean, there's no reason to not tell them. So usually if they tell us, we're like, okay, well, we're just gonna fax the doctor and let them know that we are discontinuing this medication here per your request.
Okay, perfect. And then under C, alternative medication, for the safety and protection of all students, alternative medications, i.e. food supplements and natural products, will not be given in a school setting. So if it's a natural product or a supplement, like if a kid wants to take vitamin C or what, is there a reason that that's not allowed in schools?
Yes, because it's not regulated by the FDA, and so the ingredients in there are not, or the dose is not always accurate. And per state statute, we do have to have an exact dose of medication. And because a lot of those supplements are like just one capsule or one pill, because of the fact that they know that they don't have an exact dose on there, that's why districts in general don't provide supplements and natural products to
Okay,
their
so,
students.
and this is separate from things like cough drops or?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right. Next page, any questions or edits?
I have nothing new.
Okay. And if you guys don't say anything, I'll just move on. If you, yeah, so we don't have to check into. All right, I have one thing. Under Roman numeral 4A, stock opioid antagonist. Okay, stock opioid antagonist will be available in designated school buildings. My question is, why not all school buildings?
Currently, we haven't seen a need for it in elementary schools when we've reached out to the other districts. So we kind of wanted to see how it goes at intermediate and high school buildings first. And then if, we felt the need to bring it to elementary schools, we could do it at that time. But currently, we just didn't foresee a need for it to be required, but we left it designated so that way we could always get those elementary school buildings if the time.
And the only reason that gives me, I completely hear what you're saying, but, and I probably can't pinpoint right now, but when I was prepping and reading through policy, it states that the school district is responsible for not just students, but the health of our staff and any visitors. And the staff and the visitors, if we have someone in an elementary school that unfortunately is having, an opioid incident, and we don't have that available, and by policy, we are responsible for their safety, I'm just wondering why that, if we could supply it at all buildings, why would we choose not to?
It's a valid
Well,
point, and
yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. Like I said, that's why I kind of left it as designated in case there was a concern or objection to it, but I'm fine having it at all of our elementary, intermediate, and high school buildings. I would not be comfortable with some of our, like Brother Dutton or something like that, just because we don't have regular health staff there at all times. But I would be fine with all of our, elementary, middle school, high school, and BOA.
So I do understand what you're saying, Mrs. Levy, and I think that's a great point too. I actually had to deal with some situations as such, so I definitely will believe having it at the elementary schools wouldn't be a bad idea.
Okay.
Now our staff, again, we have emergency services as well
Oh,
still
yeah.
that I want to make sure that that we. First, we have to utilize what we have at the schools naturally, and of course, if we don't have it now, our staff still needs to go through the proper procedures, the MERT team, emergency services, nurses, to provide the support. So,
Right.
yeah, I agree. Thank you.
So could you put that on our list to follow up on, Ms. Shope?
So wait, so we're gonna add the sentence: stop opioid antagonists will be available in all
K-12. I would
K-12,
put
yes,
K-12
let's say K-12.
buildings.
K-12 school buildings for health. Thank you. Just put K-12.
So you mentioned something that I wasn't thinking about. So like Brother Dutton, do we have an obligation to provide health services there?
We do, and we do have, again, trained individuals there. We do have stock EpiPens there. We do have an AED there.
There's a nurse assigned to support
There's
that.
a support, they don't have a rotation day there. They're not there, they go there kind of at the beginning of the year, and then they'll go there intermittently if need be, plus with IEPs and stuff. I would just have concerns if we were to put something else like that there.
No, that's fine. I hear that. Is it because we have a nursing shortage? I'm just trying to understand. Okay, if Brother Dutton is a part of the school district and we have like a rotation plan for all of our other buildings, why that building isn't included in that rotation?
There are so few students there that this hasn't been a need. They don't have students that need to go office visits or anything like that. It's able to be managed with their staff, and their staff have never asked for more or felt like they needed more when having conversations with them. It's like a half day, I believe, there as well. Just so we haven't had a need to go there for the limited number of students that are actually there.
But if a need arises, are we a resource for Brother Dutton? They could call on our
Correct.
nurses to, okay.
Yep, we have a nurse that it is her assigned building or whatever. She just doesn't, again, go there physically for the day or, extended amount of time. She goes there mostly for training, follow-up, IEPs, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right, next page. Any questions? At the bottom, it says 4 of 7. Any questions or edits? All right. I have a quick question on F, and this is under the header of self-administered medications. Backup rescue medication should be requested from the parent/guardian. Since it's under self-administered, it's not like responsibilities of the nurse or whoever. Who should that request come from?
I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, no problem. So
Okay.
it's, the header is 5, self-administered medication, but F that I'm referencing is actually the following page, and it says backup rescue medication should be requested from the parent/guardian by the health office staff. So is that just like the health room assistant makes those requests for backups?
Usually that's delegated to them, but the nurse will obviously help with that at times as well. Sometimes if we are having difficulty contacting the parent or making that contact, we will also ask like the teacher, because sometimes the teacher has a little bit more contact with the family, like if they see them for pickup, drop off, that sort of thing, and then we will make it work that way. But usually it is ultimately the responsibility of the health office to coordinate that.
Okay, and then hold on. We have 2 5s, I just realized that. So the first 5, it's self-administered medication, and then the second 5 is expired medication. So if we could just renumber that one appropriately. So under expired medication, when it says for the safety of our students, expired medications should not be administered at school. So I'm just wondering why that will not be administered?
Because under the nurse's discretion, the nurse would be able to give that expired medication if there was an extreme, like, emergent situation, like where she felt that the student's life would be in danger if she did not give that expired medication. So that's why I left it as should instead of just making it absolute like they cannot.
Okay. All right, next page. So 5 of 7, any questions or edits? I just have one quick question. So under field trips, extended beyond regular school day, number 2, only the amount of medication needed on the field trip should be sent. And my question is, what happens if a dose is spilled or dropped or for some reason can't be used? If it's like just a this makes me feel better thing, then it might not be that crucial. But if it's a medication that has to be administered, is there a reason we only want just the dose that we believe is needed and not extra?
A lot of these are controlled substances, so we try not to because they are supposed to be very careful, like because they are adults when given this medication and checking the 5 rights. So there shouldn't be an incidence where they are spilling or dropping the medication. We haven't had that pop up in the past, so I guess I don't foresee that happening in the future. They are supposed to be doing it like over a counter, so if it did drop, it would drop on the counter, so they would be able to still pick that up and then give it to the student. So they should never be like here and open where it would have the ability to fall to the ground.
And all that is covered in the training and the.
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Next page, any questions or edits? All right, under documentation, Roman numeral 5. So this is an accurate individual student record of administered medication will include, and then these are all of the things. Under number 5, exception. So absent, i.e. absent, no school, refused. No, actually, I take that back. I'm on number 6, errors. So wrong student, wrong time, wrong medication, wrong dose. All of those sound awful. Wrong route. I don't, what is wrong route?
So it is part of the 5 rights, and it's in the statutes as route as well. So route just means like, is it ingested? Is it orally? Is it nasal? Is it rectally? So hopefully they are giving the right route, but the route is the nurse.
That is not a typo. Okay. All of those sound terrible. Okay, thank you for the clarification. And then Roman numeral 9, it said the student medication administering log, including consent forms, will be maintained in the student health record after discontinuation of medication. Is there like a certain amount of time, like it has to be retained for a year or for 6 days or?
So ours are electronic because they document in Skyward, so I mean, it stays in, as part of
So it
Skyward.
never goes away, so
Right.
we're good.
Yes. And
Okay.
even if it's paper charted, we actually scan it into our S drive, so it's there.
Okay. And under number 11, rights and responsibilities, Roman numeral lowercase 3, report, okay, so it starts with authorized school personnel have the responsibility to report to the nurse any dose change, inconsistencies, medication side effects. But really, I was focused on dose change. So when I read school personnel, I'm thinking teacher or a para. Wouldn't the parent be reporting to the nurse if there's a dose change and not the teacher?
In a perfect world, yes.
But how would like if I'm a teacher, how would I know?
The parent will often tell the teacher. Yeah, the teacher that they changed their medication, or they'll tell the parent or whoever they're dropping their kiddo off instead of. We do try to advocate and let them know, like, please make sure you tell us if there's something that changes, but that it just doesn't always happen, unfortunately. So I just want to make sure that they also are, play a part of it. If they hear something from the parent, that they should be telling us.
Okay. All right.
About 90% of the communications
Yeah.
start with the parent, teacher. And that's, I agree, it should be in there, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Final page. Any questions or edits? All right, and I'm good on that one. Okay, let's backtrack.
Actually,
Yeah, go
can I
ahead.
make an amendment real quick? Can we actually
Absolutely.
move to the policy organization for instruction, 320, and then come back to the question that you had with the K-9 searches?
Okay, hold on. Remind me which policy the K-9 searches were in, so I don't have to scroll all the way to the top because I have it
It's
electronically.
443,
Oh, no, the policy that it's in.
policy that is in or we're possibly working on.
Okay, so give me two things. So the first one, the one we're looking at tonight that references.
443.4.
Okay, so perfect. So 443.4 and then Rule 1, we have a pin in that. Can we go ahead and approve 450? Okay, were we waiting, Ms. Shope, help me. Were we waiting on anything for 453.1 and Rule 1 of that policy?
The only thing I think you were wondering was the code of conduct thing, but we removed it from the policy, so
Okay.
it was just a response to why it's got the two numbers.
Perfect,
And
and we
then-
can move forward since we omitted it, and we can clear that up later. So it seems like we're good with 453.1 and Rule 1 of that policy, and then 453.4 and Rule 1 of that policy, and then we can circle back to 443.4.
Yep.
All right. Is there a motion to approve policies 453.1 and Rule 1 of that policy, also 453.4 and Rule 1 of that policy to move on to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
Second?
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on those four policies? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. All right, let's go back to 443.4, alcohol and/or other controlled substance use. And if you can give us the information you found on the K-9, that would be helpful.
Yes, my apologies, it is
No, you're
linked
fine.
to the back of or to the bottom of the policy. It's 446, student searches, and the language in there is the school district of Beloit permits the superintendent or designee to allow drug detection teams to use dogs for periodic random drug searches of schools.
Okay, and then I'm just surprised there's no parameters for a K-9 search. So
Typic-
is that administered by the police department?
So typically, the the administration in the building collaborates with the SRO in the building, and that's how it's set up. Because Beloit does not have a canine team, so we usually have to go to Dayton County.
Okay. And, yep, 446 student searches is reference.
Yes,
So I think
sorry
we're
about
good.
that, I didn't notice that earlier.
No problem at all. All right, if there's nothing else on policy 443.4 and 443.4 Rule 1, is there a motion to approve both of those policies to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
Second?
All right, is there any further discussion on those two policies? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem, thank you. Okay, so that takes us to policy 320, organization for instruction. All right, this is a brief policy. Board Member Schneider, Board Member Anderson, any questions or edits? Okay. Just a couple things just for consistency. Are we spelling out the numbers or do we want to use the numbers? And the reason I ask is we have 3K through 12 to begin, and then we start spelling out the grades. And I don't have a preference either one, but I do want the policy to just be consistent. Bless you. Bless you. You're fine.
Now you got me finna sneeze. We should use numbers.
Okay, so we will change those to numbers instead of,
It's because she started sneezing. It was a real thing.
all right. Bless everyone. All right. Number 1, elementary schools shall provide instruction of students from, I'm assuming want to say 3-year-old and 4-year-old kindergarten instead of 3K year. So if we can change that, and then the intermediate schools, if we could have a parentheses S, because we have more than one. And then my only question is that last sentence, in addition to the above, special instruction programs and services shall be provided on all levels to meet students' need, to meet each student's need. Do we want to specify that that's academic, social, and emotional? Need can be very broad. Am I overthinking it? And you guys are completely comfortable with just saying student need? I just don't want some coming back saying, you didn't meet my student's need, and it's outside of the scope of our purview as a district.
I don't really have a preference, to be honest, but I'm also kind of in that world of edu-speak. So to me, student need means all things.
Okay.
That's where I land on that. I'm not sure, Dr. Garrison, where you land.
Yeah, I think we probably should leave it at need, because if we start spelling out something, we probably would miss something.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I would look at it.
320 doesn't have a rule. Any changes, questions, edits? Yep, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if we want to be a little bit proactive and instead of intermediate schools, if we want to do middle schools? Since they're changing.
It just, you may know the policies better than I do, but I thought that there's a separate policy if you're going to do a change like that. So then you would be preemptively changing this policy, potentially in a policy that you haven't changed yet, but I'm not 100% sure, Michelle, if there's anything on the books about that.
I think what we can do is, since we are transitioning from intermediate to middle, Ms. Chopin, please jump in if I have this wrong. Can you do a search for where intermediate? And then is everyone comfortable with that being replaced with middle school, since that's the direction we're moving? Okay. So I think if we go ahead and make that change here and then put that on our to-do list, please, to do a search of where intermediate schools are used, and then swap that out for middle school if everyone's comfortable with that. All right. If there are no changes or questions, is there a motion to approve policy 320 to the full board for first reading?
I do have one question. Do we
Yeah,
want to
go
say on all levels to meet each student's individual need?
I think each takes care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So moved.
I'll a second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. That takes us to the very lengthy policy 343.2, class size. So here's my initial thought, and jump in if anyone feels differently. Is anyone opposed to combining 343.2 and 343.2 Rule 1? And I know that typically, like, guidelines or procedures are Rule 1 of a policy, but really it's a sentence. I'm fine either way. I just want to put it on the table.
I mean, I think the heart of most policy is we want to be as clear as possible, and having two with one sentences, to me, that don't make any. I think we should just add it to the other, and or vice versa. Put them all on the same.
All right, then this is what I propose. I think we take the sentence policy and add that to the bulk of the rule, but it would be policy 343.2. Does that make sense? So it's 343.2, class size, but it's the current sentence and then everything from the Rule 1. Is anyone opposed to that? And then, Ms. Shope, we would have to retire 343.2 Rule 1. All right. So we will do the logistics of that in the motion, but can we look at Rule 1 to see if there are any edits or any questions? All right. So my only one under elementary education, if we could include 3K. And is that meant to be that segment of elementary of 3K to 3? Yeah, it is. When in doubt, read, because 4 and 5 are listed next. So if we could just change 4K to 3K. And then I have a question which doesn't necessarily need to be in the policy, but just curiosity. Are all 4K classes, and I would assume it's 3 and 4K classes, required to have a paraeducator?
We do have that as a practice.
Okay.
Question real quick. So it says elementary education 3K through third grade student-teacher ratio for per class.
Yep.
Our 3Ks are half day.
Yeah, and the other piece with that, I mean, we can put it in there, is right now our relationship with 3K is that partnership that we have with Head Start. And I cannot off the top of my head rattle off if Head Start has a class size expectation.
That's what I'm stuck at. That's why I was like, we're gonna.
So we would have to look at that if we include 3K.
Oh, I thought we had 3K in some of our buildings.
It's through our Head Start partnership.
So they're in our buildings, but it's the partnership.
Yeah, and then there's Head Start has certain regulations, like you have, like they supply the teacher, we supply the Head Start person, we supply the para, but then they have their own expectations that you have to do to meet, like criteria for early childhood. And so, like, the room has to be set up a certain way, the sink has to be there, like, there's certain things like that, and I just don't know in those regulations if there's something specific to class size.
So would it make sense to do this, to keep it 4K through 3, and then 4th and 5th, but would it be appropriate to put a note at the bottom? Like 3K student ratios are determined through our partnership with, and we can either list it or leave it kind of broad in case that may fluctuate in the future. How would you like to handle that?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
that's why I brought it up, because I was like, okay, well, 3K got different regulations than the. So we're going to keep elementary education 4K through 3, and then we can just, like you just mentioned, put a note. We can say 3K student class size or ratio is determined. You writing this down, Ms. Schultz? 3K student and or class size ratio is determined
By like state and early childhood requirements and
by
expectations.
state and early childhood
Requirements.
requirements. So 3K student class size and/or ratios is determined by state and early childhood requirements, period.
I think that's perfect.
Where do you want that sentence?
So, I'm sorry, you can go first.
No. I was just thinking we could put it, okay, so that first paragraph, the first sentence from the previous policy is gonna start this off. If we could just put this as the last sentence. So the Board of Education Administration will make every effort to implement the policy within the constraints of budget, space, and staff availability. And then the thing that Dr. Garrison just read, 3K, would be the sentence after. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. All right, so again, that will remain 4K through 3, and then 4 and 5 for intermediate school, we'll change that to middle school. Okay, that never mind. And then we have those there, high school. Did anyone else have any questions or edits? All right, so to recap, Ms. Shope, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Let me jump in again. So I know we say intermediate school education, 6-8, and we're going to change all those to middle again. So middle school, this wasn't the situation last month, so middle school education,
Yeah, I apologize, I didn't, or I would have, okay.
it's all good. My mom missed that too. So middle school education, 6-8, teacher classroom minimum. I think we should have something in here that, I know when we go up to 30, I don't know. So class size is always a little different. I want to just note this as a conversation, not as a change, okay?
Okay.
The class size is always a little different, and it fluctuates a lot through all of our, from kindergarten to 12th grade. So I know we got averages and minimums. I'm thinking out loud now. I know we have averages and minimums.
Yeah, can I navigate that a little bit with you? Okay, so what we were thinking about is when you think about an average, it allows a principal to think about sections in a different way. So, for example, when we were bound to SAGE, which was reduced class size funding, and you had to be 18-1, an unintended consequence of that was to have splits. Because if you couldn't go over 18, but you had a runoff of like 2, 3, or 5 kids, then all of a sudden, instead of having a straight first grade and a straight second grade, you had that excess of students. You had to create like a 1-2 split. And that really isn't best case scenario for learning for many reasons. And so rather than do it that way, if you think about an average and you're creating section sizes, like the situation that we have now going into K-5s in our buildings, you may have across a second grade, let's say you have 4 sections, you might have one that is going to be 19, one that's going to be 21, one that's going to be, 18, and you average it out and maybe it comes to 22. Those are all under, so it wouldn't. But you want to give that type of flexibility in the schedule, in the course, in scheduling, because otherwise you're bound to these maximums, and it just creates that type of tying of the hands for principals and people that are trying to figure out staffing in sections. And so it's best to keep it as an average from my own experience.
Okay. I need to kind of walk my back through that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with it as it currently reads with average and then minimum?
Yeah, because we won't have, we're, right now, class sizes drives a lot of the decisions that we're making for staffing.
Right.
And so,
Correct.
I just need to keep noting that in these public space that people are hearing me talk about this, so.
Correct. And then, with the 15 to minimum, that was already there. So typically, like, let's say in our high school, if we have a section that's under 15 and it's like an elective, then we begin to think about, can we run that or not? Right? And maybe it's just bringing up more interest, for a women's lit class, or, what it might be, that's an elective. And so that seemed necessary to include, because again, we want to be thinking about fiscal sustainability and then also meeting student needs at the same time.
Right.
And then the other thing I would press on is just, sometimes we're influenced by what others do around us, right? What other districts, how does that shake out? And then other times it doesn't matter because we're unique to our needs. But we are in alignment. I looked at Janesville. They actually have larger class size suggestions. We are in alignment with Madison. And then Milwaukee has an interesting algorithm. They're like, take 116 and divide it out by 6.5 teachers and add 7, like literally. And the reason why they're doing that is because what they're saying is we're not going to maintain a class size, we're going to maintain a staffing. That's a fundamental difference. And that's why in Milwaukee you get class sizes that are up to 36, 37 students, because they're sustaining staff versus student.
My other question, thank you for that
Yep.
breakdown. My other question, it says, I should have asked this question last time, but it just kind of hit me now. Encore classes, 30 to 1 average, and it says encore classes, 15 to 1 minimum. Should we have those on the same line, or why are they separate? Or what? I'm just trying to figure out why they're two in the middle there.
Say it again to me, I'm sorry.
Sure. So where it says middle school education, 6th to 8th grade teachers, to the middle section there. And then we see encore classes, 30 to 1 average, and then we see it again, encore classes, 15 to 1 minimum.
Because on an average, we want our class sizes to be 30, but if they're under and they're only at 15, like 15 students sign up for our Project Lead the Way class, we're going to run it at 15. If it's under 15, then we're going to say we're going to collapse that. So you're aiming to have averages, but for those electives, if you don't have as much interest and you still want to offer it, at some point, right, there's a threshold where we say we just can't offer it anymore.
Okay.
That's how I'm reading that, unless you're interpreting it differently.
I just think that those two pieces there I think they need to be on the same line. We may need to,
Okay.
like we want to say, an average of 30 to
You just
1.
want a comma?
Thank you.
Okay.
Change my brain.
And I just want to point out that I do appreciate the note at the bottom that's saying if it's less than that minimum, you have to get permission to, like you said, if there's a specialized class that may have low interest right now, that doesn't mean it's canceled automatically, but that time can be given to grow interest in that because we see the value in offering that to students.
Thank
So I
you.
appreciate that. All right, so Ms. Shope, we will, and what is an encore class an elective?
Yeah, you know what? That wasn't verbiage I was familiar with either. This is kind of a Beloiter piece,
Oh.
I think, unless you used it in your previous time. But I hadn't, so I asked, and yes, that's what it is.
Okay, is anyone opposed to us changing that to elective?
Will it show up
Classes.
anywhere else? That's my other question. So we should change it here, we got to change it everywhere else. That's my,
I have never seen encore. It may appear other places. Ms. Shope, could you put that on the to-do list to do an encore search?
Yeah, I
And we're
would-
going
I
to
would
change
just
that
change
to
that.
elective
There we
because
go.
nobody knows what encore is.
yeah, I was in the same boat. I'm like, why are we saying encore? What was it? Oh, encore.
All right. Let me switch screens.
It's elective everywhere else, so.
Okay, well, look at us. It is 6:42, and that brings us to our last policy. Is there a motion to approve policy 343.2 and move it on to the full board for first reading, and also recommend to the full board that policy 343.2 Rule 1 be retired?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to our next meeting date. Let me pull up my calendar. We will meet again the first Wednesday in May, so that will be May 3rd at 5:30. Thank you, everyone. I know we had a full slate tonight, and I think we handled it efficiently, so I'm always appreciative of that. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.